Well, today's story is called The Prisoner and the Loo. These are true tales of my African adventures. May this inspire you, deter you, caution you, and above all, entertain you. During one's military training, one might be asked to carry out duties of any nature, as I found out. Even young men conscripted for military training could be dangerous and evil. I was summoned to our sergeant's office one morning. Sterzel, he said, "I have a job for you." "Okay," I said. An extremely violent and dangerous young man, one of our 1974 intake, had been absent without leave. He had been captured some 2 months previously and interned in a detention barracks unit in a remote locality in the Karoo. The Karoo being a large part of South Africa, a semi-desert in the south. 2 non-commissioned officers had been sent to collect him and escort him back to Valhalla, our mother camp in Pretoria, where he would be tried and serve time in detention barracks. Somewhere on the journey back, he had overpowered both of these officers, had almost killed one, incapacitated the other, and escaped. He was recaptured and was now back at the facility awaiting transfer for a second time. As a result, I suppose, of a reputation I had earned, I had been singled out as one who could return him to our base without incident. Indeed, I stood for the truth and would never back down when facing an injustice, regardless of the consequences. This, I suppose, was the basis of my being chosen. At my briefing, we were given all necessary information on the prisoner, his background, not great, his violent tendencies, his strength, his disregard for the law and human life. We had also been privy to the injuries his last 2 guards had sustained. Our orders were to proceed to the base in the Karoo and bring him back. Since the trains were to travel on were civilian trains, we were not to be armed with firearms, but bayonets only. These huge blades are arguably more intimidating than our standard issue 9mm sidearms in appearance, especially since the bayonets had to be drawn at all times while escorting him. He would be handcuffed to me and my assistant throughout the journey, cuffed to my left arm and to the right arm of my assistant. We were to defend ourselves using our bayonets in the event of an attempted escape. These were our orders. Being cuffed to him meant cuffed dinners, cuffed loo, and cuffed sleeping. Only one of us would sleep at a time. At no time was only one of us to guard our prisoner. We were both to be there at all times. Actually, this was some sort of a boon to us. Such an adventure. We looked forward to our mission, and I frankly couldn't wait to meet our prisoner. We were in our step-outs, our best military attire, smart, neat, crisp, and clean, with bayonets on our belts. We loved our bayonets. Boys loved their toys. For 2 troopies, this train trip to a remote part of the Karoo was like being in the Hilton. Food, and more food, cooked by a real chef. Sleep, rest, and the gentle rocking of the train. What a delight. We prepared ourselves for the prisoner's handover to us before disembarking from the train, discussing between ourselves how we would deal with this man if he tried his attack and escape routine with us. We were led to the guardhouse and laid eyes on our prisoner. He was a thick-set young man, stocky, strong, with dark eyebrows set deep into his skull, a shock of black hair and a broad smile, a quick talker, convincing and dangerous, height around 1.75 meters. I felt quite proud. My very own prisoner, what a novelty. And I was going to do my job. I was just 19. A few years before, I would have been a young teenager reading about such an event. I eyed him keenly. He returned my gaze. I think he sized me up quickly. I was not a violent man, and I think he knew this. One thing he could perhaps not have known is that I stood for what was good and proper, the law that is, and it is under these dictates that I would be sure to succeed. Handcuffed, we boarded the train on our return journey. I briefed our prisoner, and he was under no illusion as to our orders, and what would become of him if he attempted a second escape. We spoke a lot on the first part of our return home. At supper we escorted him to the dining car and had a delicious but awkward meal. Try eating while handcuffed to someone, while he also tries to eat. We got by. Other travellers on the train eyed us warily. Goodness knows what they thought seeing these young men acting out such a surreal event in their midst. We returned to our carriage to prepare for the night. This was the dangerous time. The idea would be that one person would be awake if the other needed a little sleep, and vice versa. Before long, I needed the loo. We had been briefed about him going to the loo, but not about us going to the loo. My pride had not allowed for a loo visit, which included him and my assistant. I needed a number 2, not a number 1, which I might have used the window for. Well, that was that he was not coming with me. I handcuffed him to a railing on the double bunk with my assistant handcuffed to his usual arm. One loo was nearby, the other in the next carriage. When we had boarded the train on our return journey, I had noticed an out of order sign on the loo closest to us. Out of order or not, I was going to try it, even if it could not flush, I thought, as I needed to be back as quickly as possible. I opened the door of the loo and peered inside. Everything looked fine. I walked in and shut the door behind me. It was against orders leaving the prisoner alone, and I had now left my post. The loo flushed. I tidied myself, washed my hands, and would now hurry back. Hurry back? There was no way to open the door. The opening mechanism had been removed, probably for repair, hence the out-of-order sign. I was trapped in the loo. These loo doors were so secure, one could simply not get out. I should know. I tried. Nobody heard my calls over the sound of the train hurtling through the Karoo. Now my mind started working 10 to the dozen. What if our prisoner uses his persuasive talk, asking my assistant to release him for a moment, feigns illness, or asks if he can go to the loo as well? Without me there, he might overcome my assistant, injure or kill him, to escape. Where to? I don't know. I just thought about him escaping. That's all I could think of. Then what? I would have failed in my duty, and the consequences were unthinkable. I pulled my bayonet and had one last attempt at opening the door. I then turned my attention to the small window. Oddly enough, the window was very easy to break open. I removed the window and placed it next to the toilet bowl and peered out into the dark. The wind rushing over my face and head as the train hurtled through the Karoo. I don't know how fast it was going, but it was very fast. I had no intention of using the window to escape, as this would be suicide. Then suddenly I noticed them. Vertical handrails all along the outside of the carriage, each one spaced about 1.2 or 1.5 meters apart, I estimated. They were in reach of one another. This was now becoming a little too much like a weak script in a bad Western movie. With the train hurtling through the Wild West, I was now going to become a stuntman, standing in for the actor who was far too sensible to put his life at risk. If the situation had not been so potentially serious, I would never have dreamed of performing the move I was about to perform, not in my wildest dreams. One vertical rail was fairly close to the loo window. I thrust one arm through the window and then squeezed my head and remaining shoulder right through the opening. My protruding hand clutched at the rail. My desire to return was becoming urgent. As with each inch by inch movement forward, I imagined our prisoner overcoming the guard in our room, so I proceeded. My fear of squeezing through the window and hanging onto the first railing was only minutely less than the fear of our prisoner escaping. Frankly, I was terrified. The wind threatened to blow me off the side of the train as my second hand closed around the railing and I pulled my body through. As my boots came through the window, my body dropped with a lurch and I slid down the rail a little, my feet almost hitting the ground, rushing past below me. I pulled myself up, secured a foothold on the second railing and hung there for a few moments, heart pounding and hyperventilating. Thank God I had an incredibly strong grip. There were a lot of rails between the loo and our carriage, and I began slowly transferring myself from one rail to the next. This was not an easy task, and the fear was intense all the way as I sought to survive this ordeal. I kept wondering if I could hold on as I reached ahead of me, each time seeking the safety of the next rail. Each lunge out into the rushing wind in the dark was heart-stopping. Our carriage room was 3 rooms down from the loo. There were about 13 rails in all. Blinds were drawn on all the windows so there was no looking in. At the third window, I knocked frantically on the glass. Nothing happened. I knocked again, this time calling. According to the 2 inside, they thought I was in the passage, knocking and calling, and thought it really odd that the sound seemed to be coming from outside, that I should be calling and knocking in the first place. I knocked even louder and shouted for the window to be opened. Presently, the blind was drawn up, and if I hadn't been in such a state, I would probably have collapsed laughing at the look on the 4 saucer-sized eyes in the cabin, staring without belief at my face pressed against the window. They could not comprehend what I was doing there or how I got there, and I don't blame them. My assistant slid the window open and I gripped hold of the window frame with one hand, then the next. I was freezing at this time and I found it difficult to hold on. I then pulled myself over the frame, going down headfirst onto the floor. They were speechless for a while. They had no idea there were railings on the side of the train and wondered what superhuman feat had been performed that brought me to the window. I too was speechless. It took me a full 40 minutes to recover before I could stand and transfer the prisoner's cuff from the bedpost to my wrist. It occurred to me that my prisoner might have thought that I had performed this antic so that he would be aware of my most unusual abilities, thereby indicating to him that any attempt to escape would have been quite foolish on his part. He didn't try in the slightest to escape his captors after that. Our captive was handed over to the military police in Pretoria, and we never saw or heard of him again. It occurred to me some time later that this was a job for the military police. I wondered why on earth we had been chosen in their place. I left it at that.